The Dearborn-Putnam controversy erupted in 1818 when Henry Dearborn published a post-war account of General Israel Putnam's performance during the Battle of Bunker Hill in 1775. Both Putnam and the much younger Dearborn were present before and during the battle, with Dearborn at the front lines while Putnam was about the battle scene directing troops and overseeing the construction of fortifications before the fighting began. Accounts of Putnam's presence during the battle, however, have varied among veteran officers of the battle and some historians. During the battle there was a fair amount of disorganization among the hastily assembled Continental Army and militia, making it difficult for any one participant to give an overall assessment of everyone's performance. The actual controversy was sparked 43 years after the battle when Dearborn published his account of the battle in a widely read political magazine, accusing the then-deceased Putnam of failing to supply reinforcements, inaction and cowardice. The sons of both Dearborn and Putnam defended the respective fathers' positions, while various Revolutionary War veterans also lent their support respectively. Along with Dearborn, both Republicans and Federalists, now bitter rivals, saw the controversy as an opportunity to advance the party and win the favor of the general public. Dearborn's efforts, however, were largely not well received and cost him his bid for the governorship of Massachusetts. His accusations resulted in a political and social controversy that was widely covered in the press and in several publications from offices present at the battle. Dearborn's accusations were also addressed by several notable public figures, including Daniel Webster. As such, the controversy remained prominent in the public eye for more than 30 years. Putnam and Dearborn at the Battle of Bunker Hill. The Battle of Bunker Hill occurred on June 17, 1775, in the early stages of the American Revolutionary War, when the American forces were not quite yet an organized army. After the siege of Boston, the British needed to secure control of the Charleston Peninsula overlooking Boston from the north across the Mystic River, giving them command of Boston Harbor and ultimately Boston itself. When the Committee of Safety learned a few days in advance that the British were going to try to occupy Dorchester Heights and Charlestown Peninsula, it was decided to take the offensive, occupy the peninsula, fortify it and deny the British the advantage of this important and strategic location. Word of British intentions spread fast among the colonies. General Thomas Gage mistakenly assumed that taking the peninsula from untrained colonial rebels would be an easy task. Preparation. Upon hearing the news of the battles at Lexington and Concord, Dearborn, at age 23, organized and led a local militia troop of 60 men from New Hampshire and joined up with Colonel John Stark's 1st New Hampshire Regiment, who eventually arrived at Charlestown shortly after the British had begun firing the cannon at the American positions. General Putnam, second in command to Colonel William Prescott, and reportedly eager for battle, was already at Cambridge before the battle with 250 of his men from Connecticut. During this time he received a private proposal from British commanding General Howe that if he would relinquish the rebel forces under his command, that he would be made a major general in the British Army and be compensated for his effort. Putnam kept the matter private, but spurned by the offer, pointedly rejected it. On July 16, Colonel Prescott, acting on orders from General Artemas Ward, assembled 1,200 men from various regiments and companies and departed from Cambridge at 9 o'clock that evening. Putnam had procured the various entrenching tools and materials needed for building the fortifications, had them loaded into wagons and proceeded to Charlestown with Prescott. There was some disorganization among the colonial troops, some of them with no commanding officers to lead them, along with disagreement among some of the officers as to how and where to prepare for battle. After a 2-hour meeting at Charlestown Neck, Putnam and Colonel Richard Gridley, an Army engineer, had persuaded Prescott to fortify Breed's Hill rather than Bunker Hill as originally planned. The American troops crossed Charlestown Neck and proceeded up the gentle slopes of Bunker Hill. The Prescott, for reasons that were never made completely clear, went against orders, assembled a separate party of 1,200 men and continued on 200 yards further down the peninsula to Breed's Hill, and under cover of darkness, began construction of a redoubt on a rail fence that extended to Mystic River, with Gridley in command of construction, while the secondary fortifications were constructed on Bunker Hill. This later proved to be a major tactical error. With construction of fortifications nearly completed, Colonel Prescott offered General Putnam command in the redoubt, but he declined. Instead, Putnam kept busy riding between Bunker and Breed's Hill and about the rail fence, acting as a guide and directing troops. Just prior to the battle, General Putnam came back to the redoubt and urged Prescott that the entrenching tools should be sent back and used to fortify Bunker Hill, as they would be extremely difficult to secure or lost during the throes of battle. Prescott was concerned that if he sent men to carry them away they would not return. Putnam assured Prescott that they would all return. A large party was then sent off with the tools, after which Prescott's fears were confirmed. Not one of the men returned, including Putnam. Battle by daybreak, the British became aware of the nearly completed redoubt and opened fire with cannon from ships in the floating batteries that almost surrounded Charlestown Peninsula, and from the battery on Copp's Hill, but with little effect. When it was certain that the British would attack soon, Putnam took flight to Cambridge on horseback to request badly needed supplies and reinforcements from General Ward. But since Charlestown Neck was under heavy fire from British ships, and fearing that General Gage might make his principal attack at Cambridge, at this time Ward, not wanting to weaken his troop strength, only released 1/3 of Stark's regiment for deployment at Charlestown. At 12 o'clock on July 17, British troops began crossing the harbor on barges from Boston and landed at Morton's Point on the peninsula, southeast from Breed's Hill. By 2 o'clock they had landed between 3,000 and 4,000 men, under the command of General Howe. Putnam's regiments then began marching for the peninsula across Charlestown Neck under heavy cannon fire from British ships, where they arrived, fatigued from marching. At this point Colonel Stark and Captain Dearborn arrived with the troops from New Hampshire and joined in with Prescott's troops, increasing American troop strength to about 1,600. Stark's regiment was positioned at the rail fence with Dearborn in his right wing. The British regulars made 3 attempts to take the fortified positions on Breed's Hill. The first 2 attempts proved to be a dismal failure, with many British officers and infantry killed and wounded. Orders were given not to fire upon the advancing British regulars until they were within 50 yards of the rebel fortifications. Some of the rebels made concerted efforts to spot and pick off British officers. Dearborn was positioned on the right at the rail fence, which he claims gave him a fair view of the entire battle. Historian Richard Frothingham and Colonel Samuel Svett claimed that General Putnam was at the redoubt during the first attack, but after the failed assault rode to the rear to call for reinforcements. Prescott, realizing ammunition was getting low and needed to be conserved, instructed his men to fire at the advancing British only when they could see the whites of their eyes. When ammunition began to run out, fire from the colonials almost came to a stop, where the British regulars charged the fortifications with fixed bayonets. The Americans, very few few of them outfitted with bayonets, began a hasty retreat, many of them unable to escape as the British regulars were on them too quickly, and a bloody hand-to-hand combat ensued. The British continued a merciless fire on the retreating colonials. This is when Joseph Warren, shot in the face at close range, was killed. The British had won a tactical victory but had suffered many more casualties than did the American forces. Retreat. During the retreat, Dearborn came upon Putnam behind the front lines at Bunker Hill, who was still tending to the entrenching tools, one in hand, having them sent from Breed's Hill before the battle had begun. Major Andrew McClary also saw Putnam on Bunker Hill during the retreat with a spade in his hand. Putnam was observed by several men in this capacity, including Major General William Heath, whose account of the battle he published in his memoirs in 1798. There are other historical accounts, however, that claim Putnam was covering the rebels retreating from Breed's Hill while he was at Bunker Hill, urging them to make a stand here and renew the fight at the unfinished breastworks. Dearborn later contended that the battle could have been won if Putnam, who commanded a force approximately equal to that on the front lines, had advanced with his troops. He also maintained that the final advance by the British was with great difficulty, and had the American forces at the front lines not run out of ammunition, the British would have lost the greater part of their army, compelling them to lay down their arms. After the battle, any chance of reconciliation with the British was now gone, as the heavy losses they incurred only strengthened the resolve to crush the rebellion. Controversy. The controversy began in 1818, 43 years after the Battle of Bunker Hill, when Henry Dearborn, who at the time was a major general, published an account of his experience as a young captain at Bunker Hill in the April 1818 edition of the Portfolio, a Philadelphia-based publication and leading political journal. At the time, Dearborn was running for governor of Massachusetts against the incumbent John Brooks. Being a Republican in a largely Federalist state, Dearborn badly needed favorable press on his side. When Charles Minor, the editor of the Portfolio, asked Dearborn to verify and edit a British soldier's map depicting the Battle of Bunker Hill, he jumped at the opportunity. However, Dearborn went further than that and gave a 14-page account of the battle. In the process, he accused the now-deceased General Putnam, a popular patriot and Revolutionary War veteran, of incompetence, cowardly leadership, and failing to provide support for the retreating American troops. Dearborn's accusations were completely unexpected and generally frowned upon, causing a political and a soon-to-be social controversy throughout New York and New England that lasted generations. Putnam's son, Colonel Daniel Putnam, angered by what he regarded as an unprovoked attack on his deceased father's character, came to his defense in a later issue of the Portfolio. Colonel Henry A. S. Dearborn, the general's son, in like fashion responded by assisting his father and supported his position. Both families earnestly collected veterans' depositions to substantiate their claims. Others entered the debate, including the popular Daniel Webster, who published a pro-Putnam account in the North American Review, while Massachusetts Governor Brooks, a veteran of the battle at Bunker Hill, toured the battleside to refute General Dearborn's account of the battle. For Dearborn, who recently suffered defeat as a Republican gubernatorial candidate, the controversy provided an opportunity to regain political prominence, while Federalists saw it as a way to besmirch Dearborn, embrace Putnam, and regain lost political favor for their party. There was general disagreement regarding individual contributions during the battle. Many somewhat contradictory accounts had to be considered. Dearborn's 1818 account: during the battle, Dearborn served under Colonel John Stark at the front lines, near the right end of the rail fence. In his controversial April 29, 1818 portfolio account, Dearborn directly attacked the integrity of Putnam's involvement at the battle, maintaining, "I heard the gallant Col. Prescott observe, after the war, at the table of His Excellency James Bowdoin, then Governor of this Commonwealth, that he sent 3 messengers during the battle to Gen. Putnam, requesting him to come forward and take the command, there being no general officer present, and the relative rank of the colonel not having been settled, but that he received no answer, and his whole conduct was such, both during the action and the retreat, that he ought to have been shot." He remained at or near the top of Bunker Hill until the retreat, with Col. Gerrish by his side. "I saw them together when we retreated." He not only continued at the distance himself during the whole of the action, but he had a force with him nearly as large as that engaged. No reinforcement of men or ammunition was sent to our assistance, and, instead of attempting to cover the retreat of those who had expended the last shot in the face of the enemy, he retreated in company with Col. Gerrish and his whole force, without discharging a single musket. But what is still more astonishing, Col. Gerrish was arrested for cowardice, tried, cashiered, and universally execrated, while not a word was said against the conduct of Gen. Putnam, whose extraordinary popularity alone saved him, not only from trial, but even from censure. Daniel Putnam's account, the most frequently published response to the accusations levied at the late General Putnam by Dearborn, was from his son Colonel Daniel Putnam, which was first published in the July 1818 issue of the Portfolio, approximately 2 months after Dearborn's article appeared there. The younger Putnam, apparently perplexed as to Dearborn's motives, expressed, "What, sir, could tempt you at this distant period to disturb the ashes of the dead, and thus, in the face of truth, to impose on the public such a miserable libel on the fair fame of a man who exhausted his bodily strength, and expended the vigor of a youthful constitution in the service of his country? What, above all things, could induce you to assail the character of General Putnam in a point most of all others, perhaps, unassailable, and to impeach with cowardice a man always foremost in danger, a man of whom it was proverbially said, as well by British's provincial officers, that in a service of great peril and hardship, from 1755 to 1763, he dared to lead where any dared to follow." The younger Putnam's article attempted to present a point-by-point refutation of Dearborn's account, claiming that, like an assassin in the dark, cowardly meditated this insidious blow against a character as much above your level as your base calumny is beneath a gentleman and an officer. Dearborn's account of General Putnam's conduct was based upon his personal memories of the battle at Bunker Hill, some 43 years previous, whereas the younger Putnam, though not present at the battle, consulted and collected depositions from past veterans of the battle. He also presented a letter of thanks from George Washington to his father, written at the end of the war, with the idea that the greatly loved Washington, whose fame and reputation served as a protective shield, would never thank a man that acted as Dearborn had contended. Among the depositions was one from Thomas Grosvenor, present at the battle, contending that the most active officers at the area about the redoubt and the rail fence were indeed General Putnam along with Colonel Prescott, and Captain Thomas Knowlton, and that Dearborn's accusations were based either on ignorance or misrepresentation.